Welcome to the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Join us each week as we sit down with the founder of Alchemy Wealth Management and author of Your Fiscal Physical, Ryan Nelson. Tune in to gain valuable insights and practical tips as we simplify complex financial concepts into digestible lessons. From budgeting to retirement planning, this podcast is your go-to resource for mastering financial literacy.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of the Fiscal Physical Podcast. I might be biased, but it is one of my favorite podcasts, and I hope you also feel that way. I am joined by the founder of Alchemy Wealth Management, Ryan Nelson, the publisher of the book, Your Fiscal Physical, 7 Keys to Becoming Financially Fit. Find that on Amazon. Definitely give it a read. It is you will not be disappointed there. And first off, Ryan, how are you on this lovely day?
I am doing well today. How are you doing today?
I am doing pretty solid, my man. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy, even happier because we have some listener engagement coming through here. So we definitely want to give a big shout out to the listeners who are sending in questions for us here. It's quite refreshing when we get to break down some going through topics which I love to do, but getting something from somebody else's perspective that we're able to then break down and see how it might advice that we can not advice specifically, but like just some overarching principles of how to break that down and what works best for that individual, and kind of makes me think at the same time too, which I love doing. So
yeah, absolutely.
We'll go ahead and pause here real quickly because we have a question sent in from Taylor, and hang tight while everybody can give it a listen. We'll be right back.
Hey, Aaron and Ryan. My name's Taylor, and I'm a big fan of the podcast, so thanks for taking my question. What I wanted to ask is, what factors should someone take into account if they choose to invest beyond their work retirement account? Or maybe to phrase this in a more direct way, what factors would influence you to say that the work retirement account is probably adequate enough for someone on its own? And what would influence you to say that they should think about investing beyond just that work retirement account? For example, I work for a state government institution and have a pretty strong match in my 401a of 15.5%. But I imagine a simple 401k elsewhere with little to no match would be a different conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question there, Taylor. Incredibly solid one, to be honest, and something that maybe more people should be thinking about, I would say. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to you, Ryan, to break down. What are your thoughts on this question that Taylor posed, and how does it feed into this podcast?
Yeah, it's a great question. A question, like you said, it almost maybe should get asked more. What I find is sometimes people will have a retirement account at work, and they just assume it's sufficient, right? And so they don't do anything outside of their work retirement account, and only to find out maybe it's not sufficient enough, or vice versa. And so his question is a great one. So it sounds like at work he has a 15.5% match. So he puts in 15.5%. The employer puts in 15.5%. That is a really, really good match.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
Yeah. Most of the time you'll hear people talk about their matches being 4-5%. That's one of the highest matches I've ever heard of. So that's a really great perk he has at his current place of employment. But so I think the best way to answer this question is almost to take a step back. And so I interpret this question as basically, when is enough, right? It doesn't really matter who's putting into his retirement, whether it's him, whether it's his work, whether it's whatever. It really boils down to, are my total savings enough to put me on track for my retirement goals, right? And then he can then view this through a lens and say, okay, how much do I need to be saving? And then he can take a look and say, well, this is how much I am putting in through work in my match. And it's either going to be, yes, it's enough, or no, it's not enough. Right. And so I love, I have this love-hate relationship with rules of thumb, right?
Sure.
I love them because they're simple, easy to wrap our heads around. I hate them because, people take them as gospel sometimes, and it's just not that. It's just always their oversimplified ways of viewing the world, right? But nonetheless, through this love-hate relationship, I'm gonna use another rule of thumb. And so what I always like to tell people is a rule of thumb around retirement planning would be saving 15%. So if you started saving in your late 20s, in fact, we might have even mentioned this on a previous podcast, but if you start saving in your late 20s and you put away 15%, that would put you on track for what I'll put in air quotes, a typical retirement goal of around age 65. So 65, 66, 67, that seems to be the most traditional retirement ages for most people. So 15%, if you started in your late 20s, would get you to a retirement goal of about age 65. And when I say this is why it's so important to know the nuances of these rules of thumb. That would be assuming like a 7% rate of return annually, as well as assuming income replacement. Okay. And so what I mean by that is some people, they say, you know, Ryan, like when I retire, I'm going to travel. I want to go on a bunch of cruises. I'm going to buy like a new travel trailer,
Sure.
Go around the entire US, again, stop, do cruises. And so I'm going to need a lot more money than now.
Right.
Well, this rule of thumb isn't going to do it for you. Then. This is just incoming your current level of it. This is like replacing your current level of income. And so it's a good starting point, though. So if we think about it and we say, okay, if we start in our late 20s, we save 15%, we retire at 65. So then we can start kind of applying this to our own situation. We say, well, I want to retire before age 65. I want to retire at 60. Okay, you're going to have to save more than 15%.
Right, definitely.
You know? Or if you say, okay, I want to retire at 60 and I really want to spend more than my income now. Okay, better save even more then on top of that, right? Or somebody else could say, no, I'm really comfortable working until I'm 80. And my ideal retirement is just fishing all day, every day. I'm not going to have to drive into work or do anything. And I have a family cabin and I'm going to spend less money. So I need even a little bit less than I spend now. And I'm happy to be working until 80. Well, then you could maybe save a little bit less than the 15%.
Sure.
I always get nervous when people do that because the reality is, A, you're boxing yourself into that.
Yeah.
If you have more money, you can always do less with it. But if you have less money, you can't do more with it, right? So that direction, it's not bi-directional. So if you oversave, you can do whatever you want.
Maybe
some
qualified charitable distributions.
Exactly right. If you undersave, though, you're kind of rabbit holing yourself, right? So if you're going to pick one of the directions to go there, I'd prefer you oversave. And then the flip side of that is, that's fine. You can plan to work till you're 80. What if some health-related issue forces you to stop working before that and you've been planning on working till 80? So it starts getting a little hairy there. It's like, so I think oversaving just allows you the flexibility of reaching financial independence a little bit earlier, allows you the flexibility to have more options in retirement, right? But again, let's take that rule of thumb. So 15% it would be a good rule of thumb for if you retire at age or start saving in your late 20s. You want to retire at 65 and just replace income. I want to explain a couple like, again, nuances of this rule of thumb. So one of the cool things about this rule of thumb is, let's pretend you made $100,000 a year. Mm-hmm. It's a perfectly round number.
Love it. I love it.
So if you were saving 15%, right off the bat, you're now used to. So if I made $100,000 and I save $15,000, 15%. I'm used to living on only $85,000.
Sure.
So to replace my income, I don't actually need to replace $100,000. I only need to replace $85,000 because that's the lifestyle I'm actually living right now, right?
Right.
And so if you're only saving, say, 5%, that means that you're used to living on a 95%. So if you make $100,000, you're saving 5%. That means that you are now used to living on $95,000. So now if we compare these people, the person that's saving 5% versus the person that's saving 15%, the person saving 5% is saving less, but also to replace their income, they need more money because they're used to a $95,000 lifestyle, whereas the person saving 15% is only used to an $85,000 lifestyle. So the less you save means the trade-off is the more you've been spending. So you'll have less saved, but you need more saved.
Right.
So it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
It's tough. So if you're only saving, so if you think like, okay, well, I'm close to saving 15%, maybe I'm saving 10%. So I'm pretty close. Maybe I can get it squared up later. Well, the reality is if you're saving 10%, that means you're used to living on $90,000. So you're going to have more money and you have less money saved, right? And so the difference here is, I kind of like to think about it on, I just threw together a little spreadsheet here that I'm looking at, and I like to think about it as in years to reach your nest egg. So if you're saving 15%, in this example, it'd be about 36 years. So to replace 85% of your income in this case, it would take about 36 years at a 7% rate of return. So again, if you started saving at age 29, 36 years later, you'd be 65. That's exactly where the rule of thumb comes from, right? Now, though, if you're saving 10%, so you say, I'm pretty close. I'm just not quite there. The hard part is, again, this is working against you two ways. You're saving less money and you're used to a bigger lifestyle, so you're going to need more money. From 36 years, it's going to take 42 years. So at that point, even if you started saving a year younger, so maybe you start saving at age 29 and save 15%. So you retire at 65. Maybe I start even a year before you. I start saving at age 28, but I'm only saving 10%. It's going to take me 42 years to reach my nest egg, so I won't be ready to retire until age 70. So I might have started a year before you, and I would still have to work 5 years past you because I'm saving. That's kind of the difference in the savings between 15% and 10%.
That's wild, just to break it down like that, just because I think about an extra 5 years of work to make that up. Versus like an extra 5% that I could potentially scrounge up to put in there that would save me that amount of time.
Right. And of course, none of this is an exact science, but hopefully gives people like directionality and say kind of a ballpark figure of like, oh, okay, this is how this is all going to work out, right? And so like if you were saving 5%, your years to reach nest egg would be 52 years. So if you don't start saving until say you're 40 and you only save 5%, you're not going to be able to replace your income until you're 92. Right? So you can start seeing where a lot of things start factoring in here. So Taylor's question, unfortunately, I can't directly answer his question. His question is, hey, I'm saving, I get a 15.5% match. So it sounds like my assumption there, he puts in 15.5%, his employer puts in 15.5%. So they're putting in a total of 31%.
Sure.
That's awesome. 31% is a good number. It's bigger than this 15 number I'm saying. At 30%, the years to reach nest egg would be about 24 years. So if he is 50 and he says, hey, I just got this new job. It's an awesome match. I think I'm putting enough away. I'm putting in 30%. I've been used to putting in 10% or something. Like, this is awesome, right? Well, the years to reach nest egg is 24. So like, it all depends. If you're starting your savings at 50, well, 24 years from that, it's going to take you up until 74.
Sure.
Are you comfortable with that? And if you say, no, I want to retire, I'm 50, I'm starting my retirement planning now, but I want to retire at 70, well, then you're going to have to, save somewhere between 35 and 40%. So the 30 would not be enough, right?
Wow.
And so it all comes down to the details. So if Taylor's 21, just graduated college, or he's 22 or something, and he's putting in 30% to his account, heck, he could be in a phenomenal place where he maybe retires at 55 or something in a phenomenal place. If he's older than that, he may take a look at the numbers, and if he's 30, he might say, okay, this could put me on track to, maybe retire. That would put him on track to retire maybe around 55, 60, and he might be happy with that. Or he might say, no, my goal is to retire at 50, in which case 30%, even if he started at age 30% savings still wouldn't be enough. He'd need to be saving 35 or 40%, right?
Right.
So I don't really have an answer for him. Nor would I even try, since we're not giving financial advice here.
Sure,
but
exactly.
I think it's important to always kind of view this around all the variables needed to like decide when enough is enough. Is when are you kind of starting your savings? How much are you saving? How much is that going to grow over time? And when are you okay retiring, right? And so again, if he's in his 30s and he's saving, effectively 30%, and he's okay retiring at 55 to 60, absolutely, he's in a phenomenal place, right? But again, the same exact person could ask that same question and they're in their 50s and they want to retire at 55. And it's like, yeah, 30%. Even though it's a phenomenal match, 5 years just isn't enough to build that nest egg to get you to income replacement status, right? And so, so a lot of different variables there. So if I was sort of to apply this to myself, and I was to say, okay, I want to retire young. I don't want to retire at 65. I don't want to retire at 60. I want to retire at sometime in my 50s.
Sure.
So the rule of thumb was 15%. I already know I'm going to have to save a lot more than that. If I want to retire in my 50s, I'm probably going to have to be saving somewhere between 30, 35%. Then again, that's to replace income. Then if I say, well, I don't just want to replace income, I actually want to be able to travel more, spend more, right? Do all the things. Like, I don't know exactly what my retirement will look like for me, but I like the idea of having like the same flexibility I have on the weekends, where I could just go to a movie, go to sushi, right? Like, and I spend a lot more money on the weekends. So I suspect I'm going to spend a lot more money in retirement.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And so if I say, okay, I want to retire in my 50s, that means I'm going to have to save 30 to 35% if I wanted to replace my income. But I want to more than replace my income. I'm going to have to be saving 40 to 50%. Those are big, big numbers.
Right.
Right. But that aligns with my goals. somebody else could have very, very different goals where saving 10 or 15% is completely adequate and enough is enough. So is enough? Great question. That's completely dependent on you and your situation. But I will tell you 30% is a pretty darn good number. And if we kind of benchmark it off of that 15% number, he's in a good spot. Now, here's another question though. Let's say he was to save like in his Roth IRA on top of his business plan.
Sure.
Will future Taylor regret saving an extra $6,000 a year in his Roth IRA?
I highly doubt that he would would be anti that, 30 years down the road or whatever.
Right. And I have to imagine if this is all through his employer, probably all 30% going in is what we call tax deferred,
right?
Like a traditional 401k style. It's probably not a 401k, but 401k style. And so that means all of this money is going to be taxed in the future. So what if we're looking at all these kind of baseline? He's like, oh yeah, I think I'm good. He retires 5 years after he retires. There's some legislative change. Tax rates go up 5%. If his entire net worth is tied up in this type of tax account, he just lost 5% of his net worth overnight just due to taxes. That stinks, right? So, if you start thinking about, okay, what are the wrenches that could get thrown in this plan? How could I combat those? Maybe a Roth IRA helps, diversify him, and it's kind of a hedge against maybe taxes going up. So certainly there's some tools there he could take advantage of, I think.
Yeah, I definitely think that as well. It's pretty rare that diversifying is a bad thing. Like it feels like if you can have one of our earlier ones, if you can have some lifeboats there to help save you.
Yeah. Great analogy.
Thank you. Yeah. Made it up myself. I can quote that. I don't think anyone's ever been worried about down the road, like having a safety net, like with that, because hopefully you never have to use that safety net or whatever it might be. But being able to diversify yourself to, once again, I'm still blown away by the 30% that he could possibly be putting in with the 15 and 15. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
But if he's able to get something into a Roth IRA at the same time, and this is where you want to meet with a financial advisor to be like, hey, what are your goals? What's your risk tolerance? What are all the factors that can go into it? And I know that when I sat down with you, like those are big pieces. You're like, cool, you got your work 401k, awesome. You got your match, great. But I also think that we can do for myself, it ended up being a Roth that would really help in the end, like that money grow and get that tax-free growth in the end. So I never think that diversification, or at least exploring the option, is a bad thing. Like the more you know, and maybe it's not right for him. I don't know. But being able to have the different options available and at least discuss them and make sure that you're set with what your final goals are, I think is just invaluable, because you don't want to get to be 60 and be like, rats, I miscalculated this and now I have to go back to work, for example.
Yeah, and you see that sometimes. I had this story of an individual at one time where did a great job savings, but it was all in account types where they couldn't access them. It is a way oversimplified story, and I can't give any of the real details. Sure. But what ended up happening is this person had more than enough money to retire, but effectively didn't have very many options before the age of 59 and a half. And so they had done a great job of accumulating wealth, not a great job of planning.
Gotcha.
And so, Taylor in this example, who knows what his situation is, but if he's saving 30%, again, his years to reach nest egg, so to speak, is maybe 24, 25 years. Let's say he started at this company when he was 25 years old. Mm-hmm. Let's say it takes 25 years to reach his mature nest egg. So maybe he could start thinking about retirement at age 50 with that type of savings rate. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Now, does he have a plan? Can he access those funds before age 59 and a half without penalty? What tools does he have to access those funds? And if all he has is this huge nest egg that's built up and not a plan of how to access those funds, he might find himself with enough money to retire at age 50, but not the ability to retire until he hits 59 and a half. Right. So again, that comes back to planning and making sure, okay, if I want to retire at age 50, I better start saving something else in some other type of account, developing a plan where I can actually retire at age 50 despite my wealth being adequate enough, right? So I do think there's a difference between wealth accumulation and financial planning.
Definitely.
And so he's doing a good job, it sounds like this company match is going to be phenomenal in helping him accumulate wealth. What it's not going to do is build him a plan. So you'd start need to developing a plan and say, okay, how could I actually put this to work?
Yep,
if that makes sense.
Absolutely. No, that makes perfect sense there, and hopefully that is clear as mud for you there, Taylor. And
yeah.
you can take what you want from that, but I definitely I think that you need to make sure that you know your options, and the ignorance of like potentially just thinking that your employer plan is going to be perfect for you.
Yep.
Without doing research and really thinking about like what your goals are and making sure that those are taken into consideration. That's the biggest thing that I know I did for years. I was like, oh, absolutely, I got this we're good. And then it was like, once I met with you, it's like, well, actually, if you start saving here, this will greatly increase your chances of actually be able to retire at the age you want to. And so I think that's where meeting with a financial advisor or doing your own research, whatever it might be, and hopefully, Taylor, this kind of sparks you to consider those different options and make sure it's right for you, because the quicker you can retire, if that's your goal, awesome. Let's get it done.
And you brought up a good point there that I want to emphasize as well. Is so Taylor's in a phenomenal place here, where a 15.5% match is like,
never heard of that. Yeah.
Right, that's awesome. So most people listening are not going to be in that same boat, and maybe it's a little bit unrelatable. And so maybe their 401k is doing a 5% match. So they're putting in 5, they're getting 5%. So there's a total of 10% going in for them, right? That's where it really starts. You really want to start questioning that. Okay, what's that benchmark? 15%. I'm not putting in 15%. Doesn't mean you could put in 15% tomorrow, but you can start to fabricate some goals of saying, okay, when I get that raise at work, should I go buy the new car or put it towards my retirement plan? You got to start knowing those trade-offs and knowing where you're at relative to your goal, and then you can start making informed decisions. So while Taylor's match is phenomenal, probably everybody else listening to this, their match is probably at least a third or less of it, right? I mean, a fifth, or the third to a fifth of it. Mm-hmm. So that'd be something to consider is, don't think that, I talk to people all the time where they say, I'm maxing out my 401k. My employer's putting 5% in, so I put in 5%. You're maximizing your employer match. You're not maximizing your 401k. Mm-hmm. Right? You can put in $20,000 to $30,000 into your 401k a year. So if you're making $100,000 a year, you could put 20 to 30% depending on your age and stuff. Don't just think that if your employer matches 5% by you putting in 5%, you're good. Right. It doesn't necessarily mean you are good. It means you need to do analysis, figure out how much you need to be saving, and then you can go back and look and see, okay, is my employer match and my contributions together enough for somebody putting in 5% and getting a 5% match? The answer is probably no. Mm-hmm. For somebody like Taylor, who's maybe putting in a 31% total, his answer, he might come out of this conversation or this discussion and say, gosh, I really think I am pretty good.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, personal finance is just that. Personal. So I love it, man. So awesome. Well, this is a great place to end this episode here, Ryan. Hopefully, Taylor, you got some, at least the food for thought, if you will. And if anyone else has any questions, please hit up myself, Ryan. Email us at podcast@alchemywealth.com. We're happy to put these questions on there. We'd love to talk about these things, and I know I learned from them, and I hope everybody else does as well. So we'll go ahead and wrap this one up here, Ryan, but any final thoughts before we take off here?
As always, stay the course.
Thank you for joining us for the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Until next time, happy listening, and as always, stay the course. If you have a question or topic suggestions, please email us at podcast@alchemywealth.com. If you enjoyed today's discussion, subscribe to the podcast to ensure you never miss an episode, and consider leaving us a rating and review on your favorite platform. This helps other listeners like you find the show. For more resources, you can visit Alchemy Wealth Management's website at www.alchemywealth.com or find your Fiscal Physical, the book, on Amazon. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention that personal finance is just that, personal. Please don't take anything we say as advice. The preceding content is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It's not an offer or a solicitation, nor should it be construed or relied upon for tax, legal, or investment advice. It doesn't consider your personal financial situation or objectives and may not be suitable for you.